So as a young fire chief, I learned really quickly to surround yourself with good people who are much smarter than you are. And again, good deal. They've taken care of all of the technical side of this. I think what we can do from the fire side, and there's going to be a couple key points. One we brought up this morning was the firefighter mentality, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But as you guys know, Chimney Tops was our biggest fire that we had regionally in almost 100 years. So this is just some of the images that were caught that night. Fire chief is not here because he has a new grandbaby on the way. So we knew that was coming and they scheduled me instead of him. But we are an all hazards fire department. Now what that means is basically you call, we haul, we're gonna do whatever you need us to do. NFPA 1670 has several different disciplines and we go through those. How many of you guys have been to Sevier County, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area kind of stuff? All right, so basically we have tourism, t-shirt shops, motels, hotels, go-kart tracks, and Dollywood, along with the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So this is primarily what we do. A lot of structural stuff. We run ALS fire engines with paramedics on them doing medical first response, about 87% of our calls. And then we do hazardous materials, vehicle electrification. If you don't get, you'll see a pattern here. That's my shift, okay? That's our shift. Trench rescue training is a full department operation. That's our shift on our day off doing swiftwater rescue. I look good flying, don't I? Confined space, public education, again, that's our shift. We're the guys. Our apparatus and equipment is immaculate. If you get the opportunity to meet my fire chief, if you can show him something bright and shiny, you've got it sold. So, drought conditions, as we talked about, were extreme, were exceptional, and we knew that. We knew that those were coming. We knew that we had been having fires, but they were small fires. Normally in the fall, we run several larger 20, 30 acre fires. 99% of the time, we're going to run fires that are 10 to 15, 20 acres. Not a big deal. We handle that by activating our mutual aid and our automatic aid throughout the county. We, as the city of Pigeon Forge, do not border the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. However, our interoperability with Gatlinburg, they do run in the park. This was the first time that the state had issued a statewide burn ban. 1,430 fires throughout the season for 44,000 acres. Mean temperature was around 53 degrees, humidity about 60%, precipitation was jacked, okay? We were doing a lot of pre-planning in our brains and on the tabletop, trying to figure out what we were going to do to stay ahead of these fires. We knew that Chimney Tops was on fire on the 23rd. We knew it was there all week long. But our interoperability with our National Park Service to that point was not really where it should have been. If you look at both cities, both Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge, and you look at the park boundaries, literally, and I'm not joking, the park boundary is here, and there is a house where you're sitting, okay? About 10 or 12 feet off the park line, and that is in both cities. So when the park has something, it's theirs, and they're very adamant that it's theirs. So we try not to butt into other people's business. We try to be good neighbors and let them do their deal. Again, we talked about strong winds. 87 miles an hour out on Cove Mountain. It snapped, a twig actually snapped the anemometer. Thank you. Big words. All right. So National Park puts out the press releases saying, hey, we've got some issues, we're going to be calling in help. Not really anything to worry about. And again, just how it sort of originated. Chimney tops, like Professor Henry said, this is not somewhere that you're just going to hike up and start cutting line. Somebody asked why they started this or how this started, and then this is normal regional kind of stuff. These kids skipped school. One of them, it was his senior day. The other one was a junior. They bailed because one of their dads was a police officer. They didn't want to stay where they lived, so they took off and went to the mountains. To think that they didn't get caught, people were watching these kids. Okay, first off, they were watching them. That's pretty dumb. They were taking pictures of them. They knew before the kids got to the bottom of the trail, people had been on their cell phones calling the Park Service saying, hey, we've got some pictures of these kids. They started this fire, blah, blah, blah. So it wasn't a big mystery. Again, small fire. 10, 20, 30 acres for us is no big deal. We figured the Park Service would handle it. Smoke did start banking down. You gotta remember, this is also Thanksgiving weekend, so we are crowded. Give you a little demographics. Gatlinburg City is 6,300 people. Pigeon Forge is 7,600 people. On any given night, Gatlinburg is used to having about 100,000 in town. In Pigeon Forge, we're at 80 to 150,000. Because this was a holiday weekend and everybody comes to the mountains, we were all packed. Like I said, there's 10 of us on each shift in each city, so you're looking at 20 people for about 350 or 400,000 visitors. Fire's still growing, no big deal. You can see the park is still open. People taking pictures, because we thought that was going to be a big fire. Everybody was taking pictures and saying, "Ooh, this is big." Airdrops, not very common for our area. Our air support either comes out of North Carolina or out of Chattanooga or out in Laverne, which is in Middle Tennessee. So you're still looking at about a 2-hour flight just to get the helicopters there. 27th, again, not really a big deal. 28th when it blew up. This is when we got the call. When the Learning Center was threatened. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park takes care of vegetative fires only. When they needed structural protection, is at 11:30, they called for the Gatlinburg Fire Department. At that time, we had already all talked on the phone and were at least ahead of the game in the fact that we knew the Wildland Task Force, which brings at least one brush truck and one tanker from every fire department in our county to the scene, was already on standby. So by noon, we had several different pieces of apparatus there. One of the other key things that we looked at was hindsight being what it is. We had already had hand crews on the way because the National Park had already dispatched those. So when they got to Minot Park, they were already doing some remediation, and we really expected the fire to go out in Minot Park. Little play or not. Should play earlier. So our county has 11 different fire departments, 3 municipalities, and the others are all volunteer. We usually get a pretty good response. That's okay, I'll go through it. That's our trucks going into Gatlinburg at 11 o'clock in the morning. You can see visibility is literally only a couple hundred feet, and it gets worse as you go up the mountainside. for people who said we didn't give them enough time to get out, or we should have done mandatory evacuations, or we should have done this, or we should have done that. Common sense says if you can't see and you can't breathe, you should probably leave. Gatlinburg Station 2, which is just down the street from Minot Park, was utilized as the initial staging area. As the night progressed, they were afraid they were going to lose Gatlinburg Station 2. So initial assignments were in Minot Park, and the fire station is just right over there past Park Vista. Again, you've seen this picture before. Key player in the whole deal is David Puckett, who was the ops chief that evening, the guy in the white shirt. Lots of things have been said. I think he did a really, really good job making the right calls. Otherwise, we would have had a whole lot more dead firemen. Slow burning. Not really that big of a deal. Just sort of cruising along. This is our guys up in Minot Park. Again, we started evacuating about 14 to 15,000 tourists just off of Ski Mountain. That was not the people who were in the hotels and motels in town. That truck's putting out about 1,100 gallons a minute and getting blown sideways. You can see it's breaking over, but it was also blowing to the rear of the truck. All right. We don't have audio for this, thank goodness. So this is, oh, we had to edit. I mean, we've got audio and you can hear it, but it got edited quite drastically. It's really funny because that's somebody's phone, but we all have these new cameras in all the fire engines and fire apparatus, just like the police do, and we're not used to it. Okay, the police know when to hush their mouth. Not fire. And as you can see, the conditions were definitely not tenable. We did some really stupid things that our training and our training officers and our common sense tell us not to do. We put our life, and it's sort of one of those corny things, we put our lives at risk to save others that evening. That does not normally happen. We usually try to think smarter and wiser and do things a little bit different so that we don't have to stick ourselves in that type of position. All right, so you can see the wind blowing, and again, those streams were supposed to be going straight, and I think it has, because you can see the streams splitting, I think it's got a lot to do with our wind currents and how we work in the mountains. Doesn't really matter. I hope y'all believe it. Whatever. I'm Christian. I believe that the good Lord's got a plan for everything. And when the wind blows the stream this way, it's time to go. So here is one picture of that, okay? Captain Puckett, when we started getting resources about 2 o'clock, and those resources started coming from Knoxville were the first ones, it was literally like, and I only got to see one group as we were moving towards Dollywood, but it was like parades of emergency fire trucks. Nobody else on the road, fire trucks just zipping towards Gatlinburg. Well, they made it to the spur, which is the place that the park has boundaries between Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, and there were trees down, so they had to wait for the trees to get cut before they could get out into Gatlinburg. But they were flying until we got there. We put 31 aerial devices and over 40 engines on the parkway in Gatlinburg, where all the businesses are. And Puckett said, make it rain. And they made it rain. And then the real rain came and stopped everything. To give you an idea, from 6 o'clock to midnight was terrible. It started raining at midnight, and by 8 a.m. it was over. So this is a 200-foot wheel that you can see at the island, which is just another one of our amusement areas. please bring your money. And then these are 2 miles beyond that is the Shields Mountain area that Henry was talking about. That's where I was the division supervisor. We lost 287 homes. Thank goodness we didn't lose any firefighters or civilians. So again, 911 calls were just swamped. 1,800 calls. 1830, we had more, and then 8 o'clock, and you can see how this fire is spotting, and it's just amazing when you look at the distance that these are flying and traveling. $200 calls per hour were coming into our 911 center. So we talked about the EOCs. One of the things that we have realized, and I think one of the things that you guys can help with, is we need to know. It's like you talked about the firefighter mentality. We think that we're the coolest kids on the block. We think that we're invincible. But the fact is, I can go out and break anything. You give me pickets on a rescue. I can tell you how many pickets I need to drive on the ground to move a 500-pound load up a cliff. I can tell you gusset plates are going to fail after about 7.5 minutes on a normal structure fire. I can tell you what force it takes to take off a door. We don't think about the ecology and they're just brush fires to us. What we need from you guys as a fire service is we need to know what you know. We need to know the history of the fires and where we're looking at and what we're doing in the future. These are things that I believe you guys can get to us, because most fire departments are either volunteer or very, very small in stature. We're 35 people and we're normal for America. And I truly believe the knowledge you guys have, it could be shared and saved. EOCs were set up in Gatlinburg because we lost communications in Pigeon Forge and the county seat. Again, one of the big things we had, the red teams came in. We had never seen green fire truck, like federal green fire trucks in our area before. They showed up and they were a godsend to us, because after 3 days they said, anything that's in the woods, unless it's a structured fire, you call us. If we need you, we'll call you. So that was really one of the nice things that happened for us. This is the federal resources that were brought in at our Cal Ripken baseball park. And like I said, we have lots of tourism areas. Turned out to be a real huge staging area for those who came to help us, and we greatly appreciate it. And that all hazards thing, our structural collapse and trench rescue kind of stuff came in when we started looking at marking homes. We went through and did every structure in Sevier County. Humanitarian effort, we left at noon. When I got back at the fire station at 3 a.m. to pick up a expedition to go become a division supervisor, literally our fire station it's 100 feet long. It was stacked about 12 feet, whatever you could reach, about 12 feet tall and 12 feet wide of humanitarian effort. Water, clothes, food, you name it. We didn't have time to slow down and eat. So $4 million were donated prior to the Dolly fundraiser. Mount Tough was formed. After action review, like we talked about, if you haven't had the opportunity to look at, please do that. One of the things that we look at is we're working on FireWise, we're working on fire adaptive communities, we're working on trying adopt the WUI code and do a lot of other things that probably should have been done in the past. What went well, we didn't kill anybody as far as firefighters and responders, and we stopped it where we thought we could stop it. So what could have gone better, obviously we could have been working better with the National Park Service, we could have had better communications, all that is being taken place, but more importantly, community education and working on them understanding that there's not always going to be a fire truck in your front door when something big like this happens was one of the key things that they need to learn.
Great, great. Okay, so let's just move right to. I'm sorry we ran over, but I couldn't find a place to interrupt anybody, so I hope you all understand that. We have some time for some questions right now, but it's not going to be the amount that we thought to begin with. Maybe we'll run a couple minutes over in the break, but I apologize for that. There was no time I saw fit to interrupt. So very different perspectives on sort of the same thing, right? Like it's pretty cool. And I mean, I guess I'm kind of thinking like sort of like what I don't know. Who has a good question? Anybody? To the panel. Go ahead.
So Dr. Norman's presentation, we saw that they had large fires in the area, you know, from kind out of mind more than ever. So I just don't understand why they didn't go up and really try to get that fire when it's small. They do think they're going big.
Well, you know, what I can't speak to the response there as much as just to say that until Gatlinburg, I was blown away that we could burn 110, maybe 1,000 acres in the wildland urban interface and just lose a few structures. It was a success story until it was the ultimate failure in some ways, losing so many homes and lives. It's like that's the nature of these extreme events. They're wild, they're challenging.
Can I read something from the National Park Service review here? I'm just going to read it verbatim here. On November 27th, the air attack over the fire described the fire as active. The Air Tactical Group Supervisor told the review team that he was surprised no action was being taken on the fire perimeter and was aware that there were plenty of resources available since many of the large fires were nearing containment. That should tell you something right there.
Go ahead.
The homes built on steep slopes with no protection around them, no defensible space around the homes. What's the likelihood of, what's the percentage of homes that are ever going to be rebuilt?
Oh, we're already we're already at 65% rebuilt.
Mountain tough.
We will probably be at 100% by fall, plus more, and there is absolutely no change in code.
No change in code.
Same footprint if your foundation meets structural specifications. Same foundation, saving money.
And I've been calling for changes of code. We all have. Those of us that have been up there and seen what happened to these homes, and we've been calling. And I've been in the paper as saying that Gatlinburg and these communities need to consider changing code. But then the news reporters go to Gatlinburg and say, and then Gatlinburg responds, well, we adhere to the International Building Code, the most recent one. So we're adhering to that, that's all that matters. And then I said, well, what about the International Wildland Urban Interface Code? And they just didn't say anything.
Now, I can say from the two cities, at least for the most part, they are looking at adopting the Wildland Urban Interface Code. One of the things we're going to be looking at, though, is one, you can't implement it overnight, and two, the politics is, we're a small town. It's definitely tight.
Back, as a follow-up to that, I'm curious if there were any ordinances or even homeowner association rules that prohibited the landowners from creating defensible space. Are you aware of anything that limited their?
From creating defensible space?
Yes.
No, sir. Actually, to the contrary, most of our homeowners associations are very, very aggressive.
Yeah.
Now, the enforcement of the homeowners association is just, I mean, fact is, there's no real enforcement of anything.
But I will tell you that those that are rebuilding, some that I've talked to are indeed removing a lot of the vegetation and actually a lot, thank goodness, all the dead stems that are now on their property and the fuels, and they are pyroscaping around their homes. So there is some knowledge about what to do with your property if you're going to rebuild, and it is encouraging. It's not to the extent I would like to see or Matt would like to see, but it's a first step.
And I think one of the things we have, from our standpoint, we'd love it to change today. Realistically, it's a long-term goal. Our FireWise program has pretty much kicked off and said, if we can get you to change 3 things about your residence to make it more fire-wise, more fire-safe, we will deal with that. Do those this year, next year do something else, next year make this a long-term plan so that it can be repaired.
Given the widespread arson cases that you have in the region as the cause for many of these fires, I'm wondering what kind of public outreach campaigns may have been done to hopefully discourage future arsonists.
Well, to be honest, our arson investigator is vicious. She'll throw you in prison, okay? If she catches you, you will get prosecuted and you will do some time. Now, other than simple public education from the community standpoint, we're going to the high schools like normal. We're doing stuff in the streets as far as, you know, we've got a lot of venues that we can go out and hit on the weekends where we get a lot of stuff. But for the most part, we are Appalachia, which really means that our economic development is not there. For Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, a lot of our stuff's transient population, so they just, I mean, they're moving on. It's just the way the culture is.
Exactly. Let me expand on that. This is the Deep South, and I grew up in the Deep South, and we grow up lighting fires, quite honestly. I'll be honest with you. It's
Shooting guns,
it's
drinking
part of our
liquor,
culture.
lighting
Firecrackers. You know? And yeah, exactly. You go camping, you drink your beer by the creek, and me and my friends, we lit a forest fire, and the fire engines, we were all happy about it. You know, it's part of the culture. I'm Appalachian, you know, and but it's just part of, how do you change culture? It's been there. It's the Appalachian folk way. And so it's hard to break this culture. In my opinion, these arson fires, they're going to keep happening. You know, it's part of the culture, and that's hard to get rid of. It really is.
I thought it was interesting that you had read that excerpt that said that, you said it was the air attack group supervisor maybe that said he couldn't believe that they hadn't had resources. But I thought earlier in the presentation, it was mentioned that because of the terrain, it was felt that if you could have gotten, I mean, I don't think you're going to telepack people in there, so what?
There should have been
what was
people on the
expected?
perimeter, is what he was saying. I think that, in retrospect, in hindsight, we can always go back and say, well, if only we had done this. I think, in my opinion and others' opinions, there should have been more ground crews on the containment boundary. Like I told you before, there was nobody monitoring this on the night of November 27th. And I think that was a mistake, too. So I think what the air attack person was saying is that we needed to have more ground crews. Now, to keep in mind that the FMO/IC did call in, put in a call for a Type 3 team, but they weren't going to get there until the next day. Eventually, on the morning of the 28th, I think he put in a call for a Type 1 team. They weren't going to get there. Well, they did eventually get there. But what he was saying was that we needed more people on the ground, at least around that containment boundary. There was no one there. We had, I think there were a few crews there, National Park Service crews there, but not very many. We're talking maybe 2 or 3 engines.
One more.
So Matt, you were saying that the arsonist investigator throws the book at people, but didn't those two kids get away with it, or?
All right, so since it's still under litigation and the feds are getting ready to prosecute, it's really funny. My little girl, Hattie, wants to be a forensic pathologist. Her and our district attorney are buddies. It's really weird. So he knows her name, he don't know mine. We're sitting and we're talking, and I guess I got one of those preacher faces, or tell me what you want to confess. And the fact is, they were going to prosecute. Jimmy was going to throw them in the trenches. After a long, very thorough investigation and some heart-wrenching thought process, the state could not convince themselves, nor a jury, that any of those deaths were solely the cause of that fire. Now, it did exacerbate, but I mean, we had winds, we had power lines down, we had all sorts of crazy things that were going on. So the feds will definitely get them for the national park fire. How that's going to play out, I imagine, I don't know, I'm going to be honest, I imagine it'll be simple arson, they'll probably do a little and then they'll be gone, and it'll all wash out long term. I had a friend who I worked with, I worked part-time at Dollywood. He lost a wife and 2 little girls, 11 and 9, and it changed his life forever. And I truly believe it changed those kids' lives. I don't think that they sleep at night. I think that they probably have nightmares just like the rest of us. So, will there be justice? Yes, absolutely, eventually.
This is kind of part of the hidden story that we often don't hear about, and what I listen to most and what I participate in quite a bit on some of these Facebook groups, but listening to the people and hearing the people and the trauma that they went through, and especially the trauma, the PTSD that they're going through right now, a year later. As Matt said, these individuals that were there that evening, trying to escape the fires, what they went through, not only wondering if they're going to lose their lives, and of course then they're passing and everything's on fire, but to understand the level of stress and direness that they went through. I mean, that's something that you have to understand. And he saw that video earlier that Matt showed with the people driving down the ski mountain there. And to listen to these stories, it really hits you about the human drama and human effects, the trauma that occurred from this fire. So that's something that we often don't understand, but immerse yourself and talk to the people, and you'll understand that this is much more than just a fire that killed 14 people, burned up 2,500. The survivors. There's a Gatlinburg Wildfire Survivors Group. There's actually 2 of them, and you should listen to their stories. And on November 28th of last year, the 1-year anniversary, that Facebook group blew up from all the people writing about, I need help, I need to talk to somebody, where can I go? I need counseling. To hear those kinds of stories, it wrenches your heart. So it's much more than just the physical fire itself, but having to help the people that went through this event.
Well, gentlemen, that was really that was a great session, and we all appreciate it. If we give them one more round.